Welcome to Deadline, exciting, vibrant, intelligent discussion where politics and media meet. I'm Carey Campbell. On our show today, Professor Christopher Chambers of Georgetown University joins us, Helena Cobban from Just World Books, and Chairman Robert Neiman from Just Foreign Policy. Our subject is the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee. Professor, just how much impact does this political group have on American politics?
Well, politics, if you want to separate politics from media, I mean, great. I mean, it is probably, up there with the NRA and AARP as in terms of, the giants of lobbying, in terms of, the Hill or the executive branch. For the media, which is, where all of this chess piece proxy war takes place. I mean, the media is the board among these interest groups. Therefore, their influence is great there. So, you transpose that influence on politics to the arena of the media, which is where the political wars are being played out these days. One spills over into the other. So, it's a huge influence.
They have a budget, an annual budget, according to my research, of about $70 million a year, Robert. Are they the most powerful lobby in Washington, one of the most powerful, or, as they claim, not even a significant lobbyist group?
They are a very powerful lobby in Washington. No journalist, I think, would dispute that claim. And AIPAC themselves, they kind of have a history of talking out of both sides of their mouth on this. There is, the sort of famous incident of the napkin, where an AIPAC lobbyist boasted that he could get, 90 members of the Senate to sign this napkin. On the other hand, sometimes when people point to the power of AIPAC, as Walt and Mearsheimer did in their book, then there are these cries of anti-Semitism. Of course, the AIPAC is its power is neither zero nor infinity. And one good thing, I think, in terms of public understanding for the events that just happened this last week, is it showed that the power of AIPAC is not infinite. The Prime Minister of Israel came pushing a kind of war agenda. AIPAC was pushing a kind of war agenda, saying that the U.S. should change its red line from preventing Iran from getting a nuclear weapon to preventing Iran from getting a quote-unquote nuclear weapons capability. And actually, President Obama gave no ground on that at all. So that shows that AIPAC's not all-powerful. It's not 100%. On the other hand, if you work with Congress on these issues, you feel the influence of AIPAC. That many members of Congress are scared. You can give them the most, reasonable milquetoast letter to sign to the president, as we did recently with a letter from Representative Ellison and Representative Jones, encouraging the Obama administration to pursue diplomacy with Iran, basically restating what's already U.S. policy. We got 37 members to sign it. By comparison, 90 members just signed a letter on human rights in Honduras, something that the media is not focused on at all, as opposed to, the threat of war with Iran. So AIPAC's power is real. You feel it when you're lobbying on the Hill, but it's not all powerful. And it's important for people to realize that many of the things that AIPAC does, other people could do. Other people could contact their members of Congress. Other people could contact the media. And, the fault is, in some degree, not in our stars, but in ourselves, that people that oppose these policies aren't as active as people that support AIPAC.
Edward R. Murrow quote right in the middle there. Nicely done.
No, actually, that's Julius Caesar.
Well, yes, Murrow quoting Caesar, right, exactly. So the congressmen are afraid of exactly what, or the congresswomen, the congresspersons, what are they fearful of?
They're afraid of political mobilization by AIPAC. They're afraid of being punished. They're afraid if they take a good position, from what my point of view would be a good position, that position will be distorted by so-called supporters of Israel, and that then there will be electoral retaliation, that people related to AIPAC will fund opponents in election campaigns and drive them out of office. And members of Congress tend to be very conservative in this regard. So they don't like having primary challenges. They don't like having well-financed opponents. And so if the choice before them is to do something reasonable that might have that kind of cost, or not do it, which might not have any cost, then there'll be a tendency to take the path of least resistance and stay quiet, or sign whatever napkin AIPAC puts in front of them. But now we're in a situation where the cost of the policy that AIPAC is promoting is very real and manifest. If you particularly you talk to Democratic members of Congress, most of them do not want a war between the United States and Iran, and they're very aware of how the Iran issue is being used for partisan advantage by the Republican presidential candidates, not Ron Paul, but the other Republican presidential candidates, and by people like Senator McCain and Senator Lieberman. And so many of them are quite gun-shy about going with AIPAC, for example, on this Lieberman-Graham resolution that they're pushing in the Senate and the House now, trying to change the red line, say that it should be nuclear weapons capability instead of a nuclear weapon. Many Democratic members of Congress are very skittish about this because they see this, A, as a partisan attack on the president, and B, an attempt to lower the bar for getting the United States into military conflict. And many, especially Democratic members of Congress, are very scared. We've just been through 10 years of 2 wars with lots of loss of blood and treasure. These wars didn't turn out at all like they were promised. People are very skittish about the idea of military conflict with Iran.
Just the terms there, and it's common to call it blood and treasure. But let's be more specific. It's American tax dollars. It's money that could have gone to schools, could have gone to universities. Helena Cobban, you were nodding your head there, listening to Robert. Please join this. What were you thinking?
Well, he's quite right, and he knows a lot more about the congressional aspect of this than I do. I mean, I look at it much more from the media point of view. And it's evident that this annual conference that AIPAC has every spring is a major platform for them to demonstrate their power, to strut their stuff in public. So this year they brought 13,000 people here to Washington, D.C., including members of key constituencies that they're trying to do outreach to, like just about every single African-American student leader on campuses around the country has been offered an all-expenses-paid trip to D.C. to come and take part in this, so that they have this parade of young African-Americans on the stage. So this is their major showcase. And of course, in an election year, which is what we've got this year, this is the way that they kind of, like a peacock showing its feathers, this is how they do it. And so it's all incredibly cleverly and closely choreographed for maximal effect. Not only taking all these 13,000 citizen lobbyists, so-called citizen lobbyists, to the offices of the members of Congress, but also the media is a big part of it. So it's quite notable that this year, for the first time, they actually refused credentials to several media representatives who previously have been able to take part. A few people that I know had their request for credentials refused, who in the past have been fully credentialed. They're evidently running scared this year because there has been this upsurge of, particularly among young Jewish Americans, criticizing AIPAC and its hawkish policies. So this year in particular, they were very defensive and, correspondingly aggressive. So, to me, that's in part, that's another aspect of the good news of them having overreached. And we saw that in their press credentialing. We see it in several of the policy outcomes, as Bob noted, that they did not get what they wanted. And there has been a little bit of pushback at the political level.
That was reported in the media this week. I want to read you quickly, a couple of quotes here. That MIT professor Noam Chomsky endorsed a lady of Jewish heritage one of the Green Party candidates for president, Dr. Jill Stein, as the AIPAC alternative candidate, meaning a candidate not supported by AIPAC. Chris Hedges published this article and spoke these words on Saturday night to a non-AIPAC group. AIPAC does not speak for Jews or for Israel. It is a mouthpiece of right-wing ideologues, some of whom hold power in Israel and some of whom hold power in Washington, who believe that because they have the capacity to wage war, they have the right to wage war, whose loyalty in the end is not to Israel, not to Palestine, not to the United States, but to corporate elites, the defense contractors who make war a business. Professor, is that too harsh?
I wouldn't say so. I mean, you have to look at, I have students that, some of whom have gone to AIPAC on their dime, who've turned around and said, well, if we have this war, it'll be a lot of our people, I'm talking about African Americans with names like Muhammad and Aisha and Tariq, dying for Israel, Marines, soldiers, sailors, airmen, who made that comment on campus, and mysteriously, you know, those comments were yanked from, you know, the school blog, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Really? So you could make that, you know, urban legend kind of connection. I'm not going to, you know, say there's a conspiracy, but these things happen. I mean, I don't think it's a harsh assessment at all. You have people who've manipulated the news in that they have their proxies in a revolving door in right-wing radio, right-wing television, not maybe directly on the payroll. I'm not going to accuse anybody of payola. But at the same time, these people, you see them they have a radio show, maybe on, you know, sponsored by some network other than, you know, one of the big ones like Clear Channel, Salem, et cetera, Sinclair. Then they're on Fox as pundits, or you know, or guest and host-driven shows. Then they're writing articles for blogs. And they miraculously all show up at AIPAC and are buddy-buddy with the politicians that are there. And so you have this, revolving door maybe is too simple, spider web or cross-pollination of interests and people. So, you know, these proxies are in place, and they are basically peppering, thus, every single media outlet with this message. And of course, then they can say, sit back and say, well, you know, we're independent operators. We're independent contractors. We don't work for AIPAC. We don't do anything. I have a show on Fox or I have a show on talk radio. I don't work for AIPAC. But then they're there. There's talk. There's influence, and they can mobilize and gin up a constituency far beyond, obviously, just certain groups within the Jewish American community. We're talking about a lot of Christian evangelicals and conservatives who, for some reason, look at Israel as some kind of, you know, allegorical place and issue that they have to congregate around. And that's one of those reptilian brain, red meat kind of things that these people can feed them and get them ginned up. Otherwise, I mean, how many Jews are there in the United States? Not enough to create such a tidal wave of fear among congressmen that there's going to be some massive retaliation at the polls, with the exception of certain congressional districts. What we're seeing here are people being ginned up by the same kind of news machine who are not Jews, who are largely evangelical Christians and consider themselves or identify themselves as conservative or extremely conservative Americans. So, you know, it is really a spider web that you twang one part of the web, another one rings. And I think they like it that way because you have a lot of bases you can cover there without, you know, people seeing some monolith, as with, say, the NRA or with AARP or these traditionally, you know, huge lobbies that every American can kind of think about and get with. You know, we know AARP, we know the NRA, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very, very complex and very strange and Byzantine thing, but the thing that unifies it is power.
Robert, one of the things, and Just Foreign Policy is your blog. One of the things that hit the web and went around, something of a viral video this week, was the Occupy folks who got into AIPAC and who did a mic check and then were bodily removed. There's an Occupy AIPAC website out there now. Is the Occupy movement, does it have AIPAC in its sights, and what's the implications of that?
Well, the Occupy movement is a very diverse group of people around the United States. But there is a lot of overlap between the concerns that have been raised by Occupy Wall Street and the concerns that were raised at the Occupy AIPAC conference, which I was part of. Just Foreign Policy was a co-sponsor of the Occupy AIPAC Summit. One of the concerns that links the two is the question of the role of money in U.S. politics. And a big part of the reason why AIPAC has power is because of the way that our elections are financed. And we've seen an extreme example of this phenomenon in the Republican presidential race, where we have one guy, Sheldon Adelman, bankrolling Newt Gingrich's campaign, and Newt Gingrich taking incredibly extreme positions on Israel, Palestine, and issues. Well, it didn't work to win him electoral support, but it worked to get him money, and kept him in the contest. So that's just, it's an example of the phenomenon. Maybe it's not even the most important example of the phenomenon, but it's a good example in the sense that it's so clear-cut and extreme. You have one politician, one man, one big pile of money, and a change in political development just coming as a result of the one politician and the one man with a lot of money. But of course, this is a much more widespread phenomenon. We talk about the 99% and the 1% who finances elections in the United States. It's the 1% that finances elections in the United States. And this was even true before the Citizens United decision removing restrictions, the Supreme Court decision removing restrictions on campaign finance. That has made it worse. And that is one of the examples that that is one of the issues that Occupy Wall Street raised, is the control of money over electoral politics in the United States. The influence of the Israel lobby is an example of that. But of course, it's also an example of the fundamental question of priorities. We have problems in the United States, around the world, and people throw up their hands and say, well, we can't do anything about unemployment. We can't, we can't really do anything about the people in Haiti who are dying of cholera because the United Nations troops brought cholera to Haiti. And yet, you look at the sanctions on Iran, you see a unity of purpose between Congress and the administration and the Western European governments who are willing actually to take a hit in terms of, the price of gas in the United States, and the Republicans that brought the most recent sanctions on Iran Central Bank said, yeah, we should be willing to accept a higher price of gas in the United States in order to have these sanctions. We're going to hurt Iran, we're going to hurt ourselves. Well, imagine, some of the other problems that we face could have that degree of political will and commitment, like addressing unemployment in the United States, or addressing poverty in the United States. And this is what brought people into the streets for Occupy Wall Street? Part it's a question of priorities. We see some people are doing very well because their interests are represented, and our interests, the 99%, are not represented. So I think that's another big question of big overlap. Why are we talking about Iran's nuclear program? Because powerful forces want us to talk about Iran's nuclear program. It's a channel changer from every other issue. Why aren't we talking about Palestinian rights? We're talking about Iran's nuclear program. So
Robert, they want us to talk about nuclear. They want to talk about a possible another conflagration, and not about the economic inequality, about the joblessness, about the domination of the 1% of the 1% of everybody else. That's your point?
Yes, absolutely. There is a big part, you're talking about the role of the media. One of the most important powers that the media has in society is the power to set the agenda. It's the power to define what we're talking about. And we all suffer from that and even participate in it. And again, what are we talking about? We're talking about Iran's nuclear program. We're not talking about Palestinian rights. And we all...
Well, we can talk about that.
But I'm just saying, I'm not offering it as a criticism. I'm saying that we all live in this world in which we talk about the things that somebody else has decided are the agenda.
Helena, Cobban, come on, in here. You're jumping it.
No, I mean, at the political level, I mean, I completely agree with everything that Robert said there, but it's important to note that at the political level, Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel comes here, and all the discussion is about, Iran's nuclear program. Of course, nobody's mentioning Israel's nuclear weapons arsenal, which has existed for many years. But a couple of years ago, our president was trying to persuade Netanyahu to engage in the peace process with the Palestinians. And that was what the big issue was between our government and the government of Israel. Now, nobody's talking about the peace process.
So
except, I have to say, for this guy.
That's
Nico
right. This is a book you've just published.
My company has just published this. It's a wonderful book. It's by an Israeli who is really trying to reach out to Palestinians and fight for Palestinian rights. But
what's his name?
His name
Hold the book up. Say his name.
Miko Peled.
Miko Peled, and the foreword is written by the famed American writer Alice Walker.
That's correct.
That's right. And what's this young man's, what's his biography?
Well, he's somebody who started out as a regular Israeli, served in the Israeli Special Forces, and in the course of his life has come to understand that Israelis, their future is only going to be assured if they reach out to Palestinians on a basis of equality. So
he's describing a path to peace.
He is.
To dialogue.
Yes, and equal rights for everyone. So it's a wonderful story. I haven't given it enough richness, but yeah, obviously.
So the book is called The General's Son, Writing About a Path to Peace.
Yeah, exactly.
All right,
so,
I want to... You raised something, sure, Professor, that I brought another group of quotes from one of the other people running for the Green Party nomination for president. Everybody knows her, the Hollywood star, the successful businesswoman, the media star, the commentator. AIPAC says Roseanne Barr is the voice of Christian Zionists who want all living Jews dead so that Christ can return and free the world. Now, Roseanne, of course, is a satirist.
Right.
But yet she speaks to what you talked about and something that is my own background, raised in the rural South, that was part of our religious training. You also talked about ginning up with this AIPAC discussion, but it doesn't seem to have worked. Whether the media has hyped it, because the turnout, even in George W. Bush's party, is dropping. So if the media wants to hold their audience, don't they have to shift to another topic, like the path to peace?
Well, no. I mean, that's counter to getting the ratings and getting the clicks. 101 right there. No, you want the red meat to get the eyeballs on the website, to get the eyeballs on the screen, to get the clicks, and get people listening. I mean, there's a slice of people who probably buy, say, the Left Behind books, who are looking at this as, well, maybe this is the coalescing of forces towards the end time. I mean, yeah, there are some people like that. But a lot of it is, there is a religious patina, but then, with a lot of people, but then what I've noticed out there in my studies is that what it really is, it's old-fashioned Islamophobia, it's, anti-brown people racism for some people. It's xenophobia. It's just bridled, uncontained fear that has to be, leveled at somebody. Things are uncertain, things are scary, so we have to coalesce around something. So it's not really, we're marching towards the end times kind of thing. But there are some people who probably have tuned in to, say, Fox's coverage or certain talk radio shows coverage of AIPAC and some of these issues, who probably do think that, the end is probably going to come. But it's a small slice. It's really harnessing fear and channeling fear. And that's not to say that CNN or MSNBC or the networks don't do that. What's weird is that they don't really explore the fear that should be explored, that is palpable, that, if we're going to take a hit, in other words, on gas prices, imagine the type of hit we're going to take to start yet a third war with a major power in the Middle East, with American young men and women, yet again put in harm's way. Then what are we going to do? You're going to see, what, $4 gas prices? You're going to see $8. You're going to see lines at the gas pump. You're going to see people sent over here as suicide bombers in retaliation. You're going to see the need, as the Pentagon has said, to literally, occupy a large major country in order to what? Stop a nuclear program. You can't bomb a nuclear program out of existence. Even if you don't even know what the extent of it is, even if it might not even be there. And when I mean program, I'm talking about weapons. I'm talking about weapons, present weapon capabilities. Something like North Korea has, or we have, or India has. Nobody's addressing that fear, which is a palpable, reasonable fear. It's the fear of the unknown. It's these evil, crazy, dark people over there that want to do us harm, and and their dots being connected between the Taliban and Al Qaeda. I mean, where there isn't. The complexities there are incredible. I mean, most Americans don't even know the difference between Shiite and Sunni.
Exactly. Isn't it the American media's mission, the Fourth Estate's mission, Helena, Cobban, to elucidate? Let us talk about the knowns, the known knowns. The known knowns are this, that there are mothers and fathers and children and families in Iran, in that country. Not just a possible military weapon, but millions of human beings. And having lived through a decade of a Nobel Prize winning economist says the United States has spent $5 trillion tax dollars on these foreign adventures. Let's talk about those knowns. Robert, what is the media's job? Or is it hopeless, sir? Is AIPAC simply going to continue to manipulate the American media?
No, it's absolutely not hopeless. And that's absolutely a crucial point above all else. We have, in fact, had the experience over the course of the last couple months of We Just Foreign Policy and others, of agitating with the media, with the Washington Post. They had a headline that said Iran's quest for a nuclear weapon. We challenged them. We wrote to the ombudsman. He said, we can't have that as a headline. That's an allegation, not a fact. They corrected the headline, and the Washington Post ombudsman wrote his column about it. We challenged the New York Times when they said that the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency's report said that Iran's nuclear program had a military component. We said you can't say that. The IAEA didn't say that, and the New York Times wasn't so honest as to do a correction, but they took it out of their article, and the public editor wrote about it, and they stopped saying that. And the coverage of both papers has improved on these issues, and they're leaders for other media. So it is possible to change the behavior of U.S. media if people agitate. And another thing that helps us is that the U.S. officials have actually been drawn out to say more clear things, and that also affects the media. So, as we've all said, the spheres of media and politics are the politics reflects the media, and the media reflects the politics. These spheres are interrelated. But there is, at least in some, Fox is one thing, but the New York Times and the Washington Post, there is some standard to which you can sometimes hold them accountable of reporting facts correctly. And there is a high sensitivity now because of the role of the New York Times and other media in helping get the U.S. into the war with Iraq. There's a high standard of sensitivity now, so agitation can have an effect. It's not hopeless. I think it's actually one of the most productive things that people can focus on now is agitating with the media, particularly the print media, to report these facts correctly.
Carey, if I may, to jump from that as a jumping point, we're in a very strange, ironic situation here. We have an administration that ironically has an opportunity to really set the message in the media that, and the president has done that. Leon Panetta and some people in the Pentagon have done that to some extent. But they're really, ironically, maybe they need to be, I might be struck through the window by lightning, maybe a little bit more like the previous administration in terms of framing a message to put out to the media that, there's a problem there, there's an issue there, but it is not Armageddon. It is not, crisis level where we have to bomb another country. The previous administration was manipulating the news to really get into wars. You have an administration now that has an opportunity to frame a message to say, look, we need to stay out of it. We're studying it. We're on top of it. Panetta and the Joint Chiefs have basically been in Congress saying that, but the coverage of that, where has it been? It's been lost in this kind of red meat issue.
And it's not coming from the White House. We need to see the president get out there and argue why it is worth this engagement, why it's worth the engagement in the six-party talks that they are engaging in. And he has a very powerful case to make, and I agree with you completely. He has not made it.
Right.
If he would just reconnect a little bit with the positions he took as the junior senator from Illinois at the time of, the Iraq War, and his very deep and, I think, accurate understanding of the costs of that war. You thought the Iraq War was expensive for the American people in, actual lives and economically. You ain't seen nothing yet compared with how expensive it's going to be. Iran is like 3 times the size of Iraq. It's a very substantial country. We did not win in Iraq. We are not winning in Afghanistan, and there is no hope in, any universe that you can imagine that this country will win in Iran. So what are we left with? We're left with another deeper quagmire that will eat up more of our young men and women and more of our national treasure that should be going to fixing the streets and the schools here in...
Helena Cobban.
Sorry.
No, you have a great job, but I want to pick up on that verb, that important verb and the adverb, winning. For American taxpayers, winning might well be getting out of all of those places. How do you define winning for a father or a mother? I'm a father. I'm a grandfather. Your son or grandson or granddaughter who might be serving in Afghanistan, maybe winning for them is having them home.
Well, I think
in the United States. And one other point, maybe go right ahead, but maybe winning for the American economy and the taxpayer and the deficit spending. I ask you all, maybe that winning, is it possibly winning, bringing that money home?
I think what's been notable, obviously, you're not going to get any government spokesman who goes out there and says, hey, it was all kind of a terrible mistake in Iraq, and the best we can do is cut our losses and leave. But in essence, that's what George W. Bush did with the withdrawal agreement of November 2008. And now President Obama is trying to do the same thing in Afghanistan. So it's not being framed as, heck, it was all a terrible mistake, that surge thing that I did in 2009, and now I've realized that it's too expensive and we'll just pull out. But that is what is happening. But at the same time, that there is this more realistic understanding of the very real and inevitable costs of foreign military adventures. If you go to the Pentagon, if you go to most parts of the White House, if you go to most parts of the State Department, people understand that. And certainly, you know, in the Treasury and the Federal Reserve and the places where they're looking at our national economy, they understand the costs of war. But at the same time, you have this drumbeat from AIPAC trying to get us into another war. And it doesn't make sense even from the point of view of the Israeli government and public, which are actually trying to pull AIPAC back from their extreme position at this point.
It's much more, you know, the media does not do a good job with complex issues, clearly. That's an axiom. Especially TV, the three networks, and the cable giants. But
we're on TV right now.
Yeah, well, not this show, not Deadline. But you have a situation here where internally in Israel, things are much more complex than things seem. Internally in Iran, you know, we tend to like to make boogeymen. You know, you have a bunch of power centers, or, you know, probably maybe two right off the bat, but in Iran, so I mean, who's really in charge there? And then here, you can make the same argument if you want. Who's really in charge, you know, here? I mean, that makes things dangerous when you have these different power centers competing, yet the media wants to draw itself to feed these images and these ideas to the consumers, to the audience, to get the ratings of monolithic leaderships, of monolithic boogeymen and monolithic heroes, when
Professor,
that doesn't exist.
You made 2 points earlier I want to pick up on. Green Party Watch, the blog, reported this morning that in her campaign speech in New Jersey, Dr. Jill Stein, the Green candidate running for the nomination, called President Obama exactly on his very own loose talk of potential war in Iran. Robert, what do we need to improve the U.S. media? You've highlighted some key points about how your activity and your group's activity has influenced the media. What might people watching do?
Well, first of all, everybody can do what I just said, which is learn the basic facts that are being distorted, like the fact that the 16 U.S. intelligence agencies, their consensus that Iran is not now trying to develop a nuclear weapon, as Secretary of Defense Panetta stated on Face the Nation on January 11th. Everybody can learn that fact. Everybody can hold the media in the United States accountable to reporting and explaining that fact correctly, which some media have done, and emphasize that. And the other piece is agitating in the political process. You know, on the one hand, I agree with Jill Stein's criticism that the administration is part of the problem in historically in you know the policy of saying that no option off the table. That in itself is a military threat, and you know everybody should learn at some point that there's a document called the United Nations Charter, to which we're signatory, that says that a UN member state is not supposed to attack another UN member state. It's not supposed to threaten to attack another UN member state. And we suffer from a collective public ignorance. You know, in Europe and Latin America, people know this, than under the UN Charter. And when you say that Bush administration's invasion of Iraq in 2003 was illegal, that's why it was illegal. It was a violation of the UN Charter, which is like the Constitution of the world. But having said all that, we're responsible for calling the Obama administration to account for that. At the same time, we're responsible for the fight that's going on in the political system right now, in which the Obama administration is on the right side. And the fight against, you know, the drumbeat for war that he talked about in his speech, that was a great thing that he said, criticizing the drumbeat for war. And evidence that that was meaningful was that the supreme leader of Iran noticed and praised his comment. And that's the kind of thing that we need between the United States and Iran right now, is political gestures that show that there is another path besides war and confrontation. I continue to believe, and many others believe, that there is a feasible path to meaningful diplomacy between the United States and Iran that would de-escalate tensions. And at some point, that needs to happen. And we can say...
What is that path, and who in the media is writing about that path, and who's describing it for us?
The path is negotiations over Iran's, between the United States and its allies, with Iran, over Iran's nuclear programs, that would take concrete steps that would de-escalate tensions. For example, one proposal on the table is that Iran would suspend the enrichment of uranium to 20%, which is a non-proliferation concern. In exchange, the U.S. and its friends would guarantee Iran nuclear fuel supplies for its medical research reactor. This is a deal that in various versions has already been agreed. It was proposed by the United States. Iran tentatively agreed. Then there was opportunistic criticism in Iran and the government backed down. Then a year later, there was another version of it that Brazil and Turkey helped negotiate, and Iran agreed, and then the U.S. reneged. So the score is 1-1. The U.S. and Iran have both reneged. They agreed in principle and then backed down. Some version of this is feasible. And if you could get an agreement like that, and that could happen, in the upcoming talks, maybe not right away, but if you got an agreement like that, it would be a tangible proof to the world, to people in the United States, people in Iran. Actually, the United States and Iran can agree on something that de-escalates tensions. We need some, you can say to people that that negotiations and diplomacy with Iran are feasible, but at some point you need something tangible to show people that this is really not impossible, it's really not that hard. And you could de-escalate tensions, you could knock maybe 20% out of the price of oil that the speculators have built up out of the Iran war fears, and you could change the dynamics around this discussion. Ultimately, that's what the administration needs to do, is to pursue feasible, realistic diplomacy. And if you look at what the Liebermans and the AIPACs of the world are doing, it's really to undermine the path to feasible diplomacy, trying to say, no, there can't be any deal that allows Iran to continue enriching uranium. No, we can't tolerate that Iran has a nuclear weapons capability, quote unquote, whatever that is. So that, I think, shows the direction in which we need to move. We need to move towards a feasible deal. It doesn't solve all the problems. You and the United States and China started diplomacy. It didn't solve everything at once. Some things, never were solved. But they showed that they could talk, that they could negotiate meaningful agreements that resolved some issues and de-escalate tensions. We could do that with Iran. It takes some political will on the part of the Obama administration. They are going to take a domestic political hit from the Liebermans and the McCains. But I think if they make the case to the public, the majority of American people will be with them, because they understand that in the long run, the choices are meaningful diplomacy or military conflict. We don't want another military conflict. It's better to get an agreement which wouldn't be perfect from the point of view of either side, but would prove to the world that meaningful negotiations and diplomacy are possible.
Helena Cobban, one aspect, as I listen to him talk, that I haven't heard addressed, so I want to throw this over to you. You were celebrating, honoring a year of Fukushima. Mm-hmm. After all that destruction, the earthquake, the tidal wave, now you have a veritable wasteland there. Mm-hmm. Aren't there two dots that we could connect there? Because isn't Iran building for nuclear power, for nuclear energy, for electricity? That is something that places like Germany and certainly people in America are saying, is nuclear power really the direction we want to go? Are renewables perhaps instead the way to go? Is that a potential path for collaboration, let's say?
Well, it certainly could be. I think the Iranians have made a good case that they do need to supplement the kind of power that they can get from their hydrocarbons, because their hydrocarbons are not actually very well suited. They're good for exporting for other people to use for other purposes, but that they do have a need for something to supplement. It would be great if they would take the Green Party line and Green Party worldwide, but not in Iran. I mean, that's a different issue than what the Green Party is inside Iran. But,
very specifically, I mean, it's... there has to be a path. I mean, what we're really talking about here is a path to peace, a path to resolving the conflict.
No, but there are a lot of other issues that our government should be engaging with the Iranian government on, in addition to the nuclear...
What are they?
Well, Afghanistan, for example. I mean, our troops are there at the end of extremely vulnerable and lengthy and expensive supply lines in Afghanistan, especially with all the
$1
chaos.
billion a year for every troop there.
Yeah, every gallon of gasoline they use in those huge, great Hummers and MRAPs and is $800 for a gallon. I mean, it's crazy. So, you know, if they could get supply lines across Iran to help the troops as they reconfigure and then withdraw, it would be a lot cheaper for us, and our tax dollars were coming up for April 15th.
So did I understand you correctly? Work with Iran to expedite the withdrawal of U.S. troops with
Absolutely,
Afghanistan?
yes. And for the post-U.S. security regime in that whole region. I mean, Iran actually was very helpful to the Bush administration when it wanted to invade Afghanistan. Let's not forget that. Everybody forgets that Iran was a key actor in helping the U.S. military get into Afghanistan. If we're going to get out successfully and leave something like a secure region, then Iran has to be a part of that.
Now,
instead of getting demonized.
Now, to bring it back to our topic today, of course, it's AIPAC and the media, and I want to come back to an older scandal. And this was David Steiner, the one-time president of AIPAC, was recorded by a New York real estate developer, Haim Katz. And the AIPAC director in 1992 said these words, quote, "I met with then the Bush Secretary of State, Jim Baker, and I cut a deal with him. I got, besides the $3 million, you know, they're looking for the Jewish votes, and I tell him whatever he wants to hear, besides the $10 billion in loan guarantees, which was a fabulous thing, $3 billion in foreign and military aid. And I almost got $1 billion of other goodies that people don't know about," end quote. And that is from the Washington Times in 1992. I read that and bring that, that quote about AIPAC into this discussion to ask if are similar things going on now, using that money to weld that power in congressional races, in the age of super PAC, to influence political policy?
Well, of course it's still, I mean, I don't think that we have to be careful here about what, you know, certain legal and illegal back channel and full transparent processes there are. But I mean, what's basically happening here is that people are being solicited for money, be they Jewish Americans or be they you know, people who are, you know, or fair-minded about Israel. Let's say, you know, I like that nation. I want it to have a chance. They're getting their $10, their $20 siphoned off, or their $20,000, $10,000 siphoned off. It goes into a pot, and then that's doled out, you know, into congressional races. But then what the payback comes back when foreign aid is authorized, where projects, et cetera, across the, you know, the globe are authorized. I mean, you know, you have a nation that has been basically the 51st state for Lord knows how long now.
Israel,
yeah,
the 51st
Israel.
state.
I mean, I think a lot of people in Puerto Rico are wondering, you know, when are we going to get some of that money? And you know, and so you have an economy that's propped up that based on that. You know, so yes, there are a lot of palms being greased in the name of protecting the security of this nation, and you know, and deeper than that, in the name of protecting you know, the Jewish people from, you know, the legendary. The legendary becomes almost a creed of annihilation. So when you can play on that, you know, it's at the front end of the pipeline, the money's coming in. At the back end, it goes back to rewater that feeling. We've
got about 2 minutes to go. Helena, Cobban,
No, I mean, I really need to go.
Robert?
Well, I think it's important to try and be precise and nuanced about these things. And I said at the beginning that, you know, AIPAC's power isn't zero and it's not infinity. And some of the things that they do, you know, we could do. And particularly we're in this moment now when a lot of people are more engaged because of the threat of war. So we should use this moment to get people more engaged with Congress, with the media, to advocate for a different set of policies. And part of advocacy, I think, is it's important to be precise. There are a lot of Americans who will respond to an appeal that's about, quote unquote, supporting Israel, protecting Israel, defending Israel's right to exist. But if you look at the front line in Washington, it's not about Israel's right to exist. It's not about whether Israel is going to survive. It's about a particular set of policies that the right wing are trying to drive that are not in the interest of the majority of Israelis. They're not in the interest of the majority of Americans who don't need another war. And another war is something that we can stop. So the most important takeaway, I think, is that we have an opportunity for change. We have an opportunity to engage. And we should seize this opportunity.
Final comments. One time quickly around.
You know, the media has this huge power to shape the discourse and the way people think, and AIPAC and its allies in the pro-Likud network have used that power very well. Now the rest of us have a chance, and I think, as Bob says, it's going to happen.
Professor.
Right now, I'm not very optimistic because this is an election year. We have so many variables that are the red meat issues or non-issues, and I don't think that we're in a situation or a milieu now where people can make reasonable decisions. So I'm going to take the pessimistic view right now.
Fantastic. I want to thank you all so much for your time, your precious time today, for coming and joining this discussion. It's been a great pleasure to be with you. Professor Christopher Chambers, Georgetown University, Helena Cobban, Just World Books, and Robert Neiman, Just Foreign Policy. I thank you all so much for joining us and here watching Deadline. We look forward to seeing you next time. I'm Carey Campbell. Until then.